Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here, and today I am talking about all of the books I did not finish in the first half of 2025. So I give up on books, sometimes for very silly reasons and sometimes for valid reasons, but I try really hard to put down books that I'm really not enjoying. Ultimately, why push myself to, read something I'm not having a good time with when there's so many awesome books out there? So these are the 11 books I gave up this year, and probably the petty reasons as to why. We're gonna start in chronological order and work, from January to June. In January, we're gonna talk about In the Long Run by Haley Cass. I read 66% of this book and did not finish it. That's a lot of a book to read, and this is a particularly long one. This is a contemporary sapphic romance. It's kind of a second chance. These two women knew each other in growing up and then have been going off doing their own thing. One moves away and is a travel blogger, and the other stayed in their hometown and is now the mayor of the hometown. So this is kind of them reconnecting and falling in love with each other. I'm just gonna read what I wrote about these characters and why this didn't work for me, because it's been so long at this point that I want to make sure I articulate my reasons for giving up well, and I wrote it here. Taylor, one of the characters, is kind of annoying. She's always flirting and teasing and she's never serious. But Brooke is annoying because she looks down on Taylor and her career as a travel blogger. I get being silly and unserious, but after a while I need some more depth and seriousness, and I cannot stand that Brooke seems to have such a low opinion of what Taylor has built for herself with her online career. I understand character growth should happen, but it just irks me that this is the basis for the relationship to start with. Also, two consenting adults in their 40s who are obviously attracted to each other getting together is a bad idea, and then having basically a falling out because of it is stupid and trite. Also, this is really slowly paced, which I can sometimes get behind, but not when I'm this frustrated with the main couple. There you have it. I just wasn't loving the character dynamic and how these two were treating each other, and so I gave up at 66%. Then we have Two Like the Lightning by Ada Palmer. I read 15% of this, which isn't that much. This book has a really interesting premise and really interesting world building, but it is told in the most boring, slow-paced way as possible. I really wish this book focused on the actual story it was trying to tell, instead of spending pages and pages and pages and pages philosophizing, essentially. I wrote, such great potential, so bored. This one we can kind of go through rather quickly. This is Under Fortunate Stars by Ren Hutchinson, and I read 50% of this book. I was bored and I didn't care about any of the characters. Also, this has like a kind of a time loop situation where there's a ship back in time meeting another ship and them trying to grapple with, what does this mean? And I didn't care, unfortunately. We have The 13th Tale by Diana Setterfield. I read 18% of this back in February. And one, the book has no plot. The plot is non-existent. Which sometimes I can get behind if I'm enjoying the characters, and that was not the case. Also, this book, this is like a character telling someone else their life story, and in that life story, we start with like her grandparents, and like there was some incest going on, and I'm not okay with that. That was really gross. And so since I was bored already and not loving the direction of the story, I was just like, yeah, that's my final straw. We're done here. The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. I read 34% of this back in March. And honestly, I could feel myself getting into a reading slump with this one. I just was dreading picking it back up and was feeling myself kind of slipping into kind of a dark place. which I didn't love, so that's kind of why I gave up. So let me review my notes again. Honestly, I'm getting a little uncomfortable with the focus on religion and the discussion of Israel. I'm sad because I was really enjoying the side characters, but it's heavily hinted at that they die, so I don't feel too bad putting this one down. Anne and George Edwards Forever, they're a couple, married couple, and they are really awesome characters, but if they die in the end, I was like, I'm not slugging through the rest of this for that. The Galactic Zookeeper's Guide to Heists and Husbandry by A.C. Huntley. This was also back in March, and I read 38% of this, and this is like one of the worst written books I've attempted. The main character was so whiny and obnoxious and millennial, and I'm a millennial, so you'd think I'd like relate, but she just ended up being so whiny and obnoxious that I couldn't stand the plot, I couldn't stand the characters or the writing of this. I just hated every second of it, and I feel really bad because this one like is an indie pub book, but I couldn't stand it. Then we have Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. This is a nonfiction that I read 10% of, and I just decided that I wasn't as interested in this topic as I thought. This is kind of a very sensitive topic for me personally as someone who suffers from chronic pain. So I was just like, maybe I can try and learn a little bit more about this, but I just wasn't as interested in like the legal aspect of this story. And just was like, I'm gonna protect myself here and move on to something else. Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. I read this in April, or I read 20% back in April, and I was bored. This is a literary sci-fi, and I was trying to read some literary sci-fi back to back to try and like see if that was like a subgenre of sci-fi I was interested in, and the answer is rarely does it work for me, unfortunately. This is a literary sci-fi that I was just like, I'm so bored. I'm much more of an epic sci-fi type person, like galactic sci-fi, what is it called? Hard sci-fi? Space opera. That's what I'm looking for. I'm more of a space opera girly than lit fic sci-fi, unfortunately. And that kind of goes for I Cheerfully Refuse by Leif Enger. I also read 20% of this, and this is another example of just like a literary sci-fi. I was trying to read a couple in a row to try and see if it was a subgenre for me, and it's just not. So like nothing against these two books, it's just a subgenre that doesn't work for me personally. Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle is a horror that I read 53% of and decided to give up. The reason is I was bored and I'm just not super invested in the character or kind of what was happening. It's kind of about a screenwriter who is starting to be haunted by his own monsters that he's created for a film, like what he's written. They're starting to like come to life and haunt him. And by the halfway point, I was just like, I'm not really invested in this. So I gave up. And actually the last book we have to talk about is Exhalation by Ted Chiang. And this I read in May, or read some of it, 40% of it in May. And reading 40% of this collection was 2 short stories and a novella. The novella was actually quite long, and I don't think there's anything wrong with this collection, but I read, again, 2 short stories and one of the novellas, and I just was like not super impressed. I didn't really feel compelled to keep going, and I just wanted to move on to other books, to be honest. Like, I was just like, I'm not super impressed with this writing. He has some interesting concepts, but I don't think they're necessarily executed to my personal reading taste. So I was like, I'll just move on to other books. That is it, actually. Those are the 11 books I quit this year, and from January through June. So we're finding I'm DNFing less because I'm reading a little bit less. I'm finding more books that I'm enjoying, which is great. I'm sticking to some familiar territory a little bit more in some ways, but still trying to go outside of the box in others. I think there's only been one book so far this year in 2025 that I wished I'd given up on and DNF'd. But that's pretty good in my opinion. Like finishing all these books and only having one that I regret reading is pretty good for me. I've been trying really hard not to push through those and just put them down. But do you give up on books if you're not enjoying them? Are any of these books worth pushing through? I'm sure some of them are, but let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in another video of mine very soon. Bye!